Ну ладно, работаем.
Hello, Tim. Thank you for visiting our country and staying here.
Oh yeah, I've been visiting for a while. Yeah.
I have some followers from America, from other countries that speak English and that are interested in visiting Russia.
Okay.
But you live here.
Yeah.
So can you explain them why are you here?
Well, if any of our friends are from Cleveland, try growing up in the ghetto in Cleveland. It's a fantastic childhood and lifestyle. So anyways, that sort of, a lot of the sort of, and a more serious answer, a lot of the things that people see happening around America, like the whole sort of like homeless and like drug addict crisis, well, I kind of saw that when I was a kid, right? And I basically kind of felt like I was on a sinking ship, and I couldn't really find a particular place in society because when you live in a neighborhood where everyone's black and you're not, well, you're never going to be accepted. But also, that's the culture I was raised in, right? I wasn't raised with I don't know, Muffy and Buffy at the golf course, you know what I mean? Or in Nantucket on some kind of sailboat. That's also alien to me. So it's like you can't be a black American, you can't be a white American. What can you be? Go back to your Slavic homeland. So I went back to the motherland where my ancestors came from. So that's kind of the motivation there.
So basically you have never seen old money in America.
The old money? No. We're a pierogi eating type of family. We didn't have access to old money. However, my grandfather both grandfathers were fairly successful, but the one grandfather actually had his own business and all that, but the oil companies shoved him out. So that's another thing where, maybe if I would have grown up with the opportunity to inherit my grandfather's business, maybe I would have stayed in America because I would have had my whole life set up for me, but I kind of had to start from zero, sadly.
So what about Russia? How do you feel here?
Well, if I didn't feel good, I'd be gone a long time ago. I've been here for 20 years, things in Russia make sense to me and work for me, and I think my life is on a better path here, or at least I'm in the middle class, whereas in America I was not.
So you've moved here around
2006.
That was kind of crazy time still in Russia.
Well, yeah, but that's because a lot of people think about immigration really in economic terms, whereas mine was more sort of like this identity, philosophical sort of thing. Because, like, even in America, say I would have been able to have like a middle class lifestyle, there's something there. I don't know, I still really wouldn't have been particularly thrilled by it. I don't know. So for me, it was just sort of more like, I'll put it this way. In America, I was a loser. And I didn't like that status. And I wanted to stop being a loser. And I served in the U.S. Peace Corps in Kazakhstan for 2 years. And I kind of noticed that when I went to a different society, I kind of got like a restart. A lot of people go to America from there's some countries, there's a caste system, ancient religious traditions, ethnic tension. And they go to America and all that's gone. And they kind of get to start over. And going to Russia, it kind of gave me the ability to really restart my life. Mm-hmm. So,
like some people go to Bali for that.
Oh, well, that's on some sort of like mystical yoga, spiritual vision. I would say more like people from Bali who go to America are usually the ones who are kind of getting away from that. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I see that you feel good here.
No.
And a lot of people say that even Russian people who live here, they say that it's really bad, that the times are awful, that we are going down. What can you say about that?
Well, I don't know. It depends on what you want to look at. If you want to look at things from statistics, it depends on what statistics. If you look at Russia's GDP, then it's basically Portugal or Spain with a gas station, or like, I forget, one American politician, I think it was John McCain, said something like that. That's basically, they said there's Nigeria with a gas station. But if you look at things in purchasing power parity, then Russia is the number 4 economy in the world. So the question is, what statistics do you believe? There's some statistics that show that Russia is like the number 4 country in the world economically, or that it's number, I don't know, where's Spain? Number 80 or 90 or 100 or whatever they're at. So, it's kind of hard to say, but I personally live a good lifestyle here. I can see that there's a lot of development. There's a lot of things being built. And I would say that one major difference between Russia and the United States is after the Cold War ended, in America, I think we've always been going in the wrong direction from the end of the Cold War. Just everything is being done, everything gets worse every year. In Russia, somewhere around the mid-2000s, like when I came around, it seems like things are slowly every year getting better and going in the right direction. I don't know how to explain that. So in terms of vibe, I think Russia has a much more positive, optimistic vibe. Not that America can't be fixed. Let's hope Trump can do it. But it definitely seemed like the ship was sinking when I was a younger man in America, and I didn't want to sink with the ship, especially when it felt like all the people who were on the ship kind of hated me anyways. You know what I mean?
Some Americans write me comments. They want Russians to send Putin to them to fix the country. And a lot of Europeans, a lot of people from all over the world say that they want Putin as a president in their country. So what do you think about Putin? Is he a good president?
Well, here, how about this about can Putin do it? We have to remember that different countries have sort of different histories. And Russian history is defined by if there is a strong central leader, then Russia grows and gets better. If Russia has weak or treacherous leaders, things are really bad. What do I mean? Like Ivan IV, also known as Ivan the Terrible, Russia gets stronger. Catherine the Great, period of strength and stability. She lived for a long time. Russia gets stronger. Putin we have, although in the West people don't like him, Stalin was a strong leader that was very popular. Russia gets stronger. When we get into people like Khrushchev, Gorbachev, Yeltsin, the time of troubles when after Ivan IV, when there sort of was no leader, that's when Russia was in deep doo-doo. So people in Russia sort of have this internal logic where strong leader equals prosperity. Whereas in other countries like in America, they don't have that. So the problem is even if you took Putin and transplanted him into the American presidency, which would be impossible, let's say they do it, well, the American president doesn't have the powers of the Russian president. And people in America don't necessarily have like the same mindset. Like Putin would have maybe he might be able to do it, but it'd be very hard. Whereas in Russia, I think there's sort of a natural kind of rally around the flag sort of mentality, especially when you get a good signal from up top. I don't know. But the one thing Putin did is he was able to defeat the oligarchy and a lot of corruption in business and all that. And if Trump's going to defeat the military-industrial complex, he's got a long way to go. But again, the American president isn't nearly as powerful as the Russian president. Yeah. And I, to be honest, don't even think Putin's really used the full extent of his power. People think he's a dictator. He demands stuff. Not really. He's actually very much wants civil society to do stuff. He doesn't make bold moral declarations. Like, you know how there was Mao Zedong had a little red book, like his own personal little Bible philosophy. Gaddafi, I believe, had a green book. Lenin wrote a lot of materials. There's these sort of like manifestos and stuff that leaders write. Well, Putin's never done that. There is no Putin manifesto. There is no little red, blue, and white book from Putin. That doesn't exist.
Well, Russians who support Putin, they think that Putin is the one who brought democracy to Russia. Mm-hmm. Do you feel if there is any democracy in Russia, or you think that it's the most democratic country, or you feel like it's not democracy here at all?
Well, the problem is it depends on what you define as democracy. Because, East Germany, back when there was an East Germany, one of the D's what would it be in English? DDR? Like Deutsche Demokratische Republik or something, right? So they called themselves democratic. North Korea considers themselves democratic. To be honest, pretty much everyone does. So the word democratic is kind of meaningless. I'll put it this way. Do people in Russia believe that to some extent the powers that be listen to them? Yes, because one thing that is a very large part of life in Russia is they do a lot of polling, they're monitoring numbers. This is the case in China too, where the people in power really want to know what the populace is thinking so they can make decisions, they can keep everyone happy, keep society stable. So I think that that's actually maybe more important of an aspect of democracy than some sort of voting system. Because the voting system, pretty much everywhere in the world, is a little bit questionable. And as we've seen over the last few voting cycles in the United States, there's a lot of problems that need to be fixed.
Well, I think that Russia is controlled, it's organized, and it's united.
Yeah.
But our Russian people look like they're free.
Well, again, sort of freedom depends on what you want to do. I'll tell you this much. My personal definition of freedom, which I call Kirbian freedom, is that, in all honesty, people feel the most free when other people around them agree with them, okay? So say you were in America, or I was in America, and I go to a party with all like super LGBT'd out liberal people. Well, they all hate me. They're not going to want to like have a conversation with me. I'll feel very restricted in that environment. However, they'll feel completely free in the same environment. We take some guy who's like a really passionate Muslim, and he's in Saudi Arabia. Well, everything in Saudi Arabia is oriented towards Islam. All the food is halal. They celebrate all the holidays the right way. All of a sudden, we transplant him to somewhere else. I don't know, Idaho in America, where no one does this stuff, and all of a sudden he'll feel like something's wrong, like he's being repressed. He can't really be Muslim. And so in a lot of ways, our idea of freedom is really this desire to be in this sort of society where there's a lot of agreement. And so does Russia have that? I would say yes, because about 80% of the population in Russia, plus minus, as they say in Russian, plus minus, thinks about the same. And you see that in sort of like popularity in terms of polling, that there's a lot of homogeny. And that's another reason why people like in Europeans will be like, oh, it's awful that there's immigrants. And other people say, it doesn't matter, we're all humans. It matters if people think the same. And I think as long as people sort of have a overall culture and mindset, and they more or less agree on things, then you feel a lot of freedom. Because then you can do whatever you want because everyone agrees with you, and you're basically in the exact same Overton window. You see what I mean? Whereas if you're in a different Overton window, you'll feel restricted every day of your life. And it doesn't really matter too much about what the political system's like or how the police behave or how elections are conducted and all that. So.
Well, I guess in Russia, people can feel free because they are in their own environment.
Yeah.
That's what you said. And also, I think because it's much safer.
Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. What are some freedoms in Russia that maybe I enjoy personally? Probably the number one thing where I feel very free in Russia is the fact that in Russia, like, there are building codes, but you can just build your own house. You can just buy land with your own two hands. No inspectors, none of these permissions. Also, property taxes are like, I have multiple pieces of property. I pay like $30 a year. Like that. That I think is an incredible freedom, whereas in the United States we have this total construction fascism where you always have to do everything the way that some bureaucrats want. They're always monitoring you, or you get into these insane situations where I know someone who has a 2-story house and the second story of his house is empty. It's bare walls. Why? Because if he were to improve the upstairs, it would count as living space and he'd have to pay twice as many taxes. That's ridiculous. And in Russia, you don't have any of that. In Russia, you just build stuff the way you want. It's amazing. So that's kind of an example. But again, why do I feel free? Because I agree with the Russian methodology that you should be able to just do whatever the hell you want, right? So I have an agreement, so therefore I feel free. Now, and some people who like rules and everything's controlled, they probably like the American system because it's very guaranteed that you can't put a staircase within 30 inches of like an electrical box. Why? Because they said so. But I think some people who really like rules will be like, it's good. The electrical box is far from the stairs. All the stairs are 8 inches tall. Did you notice? They're all 8 inches tall, every step. And for some people that predictability or rulesiness is probably pretty good, especially for people who came from like the chaos of Russia in the 90s. Where there were no rules. Everything was just an anarchy. And they go to America or Canada and they're like, wow, there's rules everywhere. How nice. So they agree with that.
Yeah, but now these days, if you come to New York City or California, it's like worse than 90s in Russia.
Well, I can't testify to that. Unfortunately, as someone who lives in Russia, I'm kind of a little bit concerned to do international travel due to sanctions. But unfortunately, that might be the case. Yeah. So
thank you very much for coming here, and thank you for loving this country.
I do what I can. I try to promote the country as much as I can because there's been and still is and just a storm of lies about Russia, just a lot of stuff that isn't true. And I think that it also applies to a lot of countries. The world outside of the United States is actually a lot more normal and maybe similar than you might think. Yeah, there is no, I'll put it this way, the media in America always wants to make this into this sort of angels and devils. And even in some place that has a lot of crime, and the people there are really poor, and they look different than you, and they have a different religion or whatever, the average person there still isn't just sitting in some country, I don't know, let's take Cameroon or something. There isn't some guy in Cameroon thinking, yeah, if only I could blow up America, or if I see an American tourist, I'll definitely kill them. No one's thinking that. He's thinking about, boy, I'd like to have a nice wife and have a nice kids, and well, I kind of live in not the best situation. Wouldn't it be nice to have really good electricity and a nice house? That's what the average person is thinking. The average person is not thinking about like doing another 9/11.
Yes, we still live in the same world and we have to be friendly. That's the only way how we can survive here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My pleasure.